Hi, I'm Betsy Golden. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I am going to cover what inks are safe to use with alcohol markers. I started off with this ink pad that I found at Hobby Lobby years ago, and it has always been tried and true. But over the years, there has been numerous ink pads that have been released, and I'm going to go over the three most common ones that people think that they can use with an alcohol marker, but they really shouldn't, and we're going to talk about why. And those ink pads are this one, which is totally okay with alcohol ink. This is my go-to. I'm going to show you why. We're going to start with this one. Stazon is another one that people think that they can because it's waterproof. And then archival ink by Ranger is another one that people try to color in with alcohol ink, the images that have been stamped with this. This one is not alcohol ink safe. You should not ever use this with alcohol ink, and Ranger will even tell you that. So I am going to use an alcohol ink marker. Please understand I'm not going to use one of my Copics because I'm probably going to ruin it. So I'm going to use my cheap Style File marker. This marker is probably my least favorite alcohol ink in my stash, just because the tip on it is good, but it's a little juicy, and the color swap is not always the same, so it's hard for me to get consistent. So if I end up just trashing this, I'm okay with that. I just didn't want to try a Copic marker on this, but a Copic marker is going to respond the same with this as is any of your other alcohol markers, are all going to work the same with these inks. So I have gone ahead and stamped out a balloon, and I marked which one of these inks this is stamped in. And the balloon I just got from this stamp set called Cakewalk by Simon Hurley. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first one that we're going to do is the one that I know won't ruin the marker, which is going to be the memento. And whenever you're coloring with alcohol ink, you always want to make sure you have a piece of paper underneath your image. And that is because the alcohol ink will saturate and it will rise back up, which will lead to bleeding and things like that, and out of the lines type colors. So depending on how juicy your marker is, depends on how many pieces of paper you will have underneath your image. Style file markers are very juicy, so I have to definitely use at least 2 sheets. So I'm just going to go through, make sure that I touch the tip to the ink. Sorry, sometimes I can't talk and do something at the same time. And let's just see how this holds up. Now, you may be asking yourself, what's the deal? Why are there so many different inks out there? And that basically comes down to what kind of mediums you're using with them. The memento ink pads have been created for alcohol ink, and just because this works with alcohol ink does not mean that it's going to work with a water-based ink. But as you can tell, that worked quite well. There's no, the ink didn't get pulled through, it didn't ruin the tip of my marker, nothing. So this is a safe ink. The good news is you can find this anywhere. You can go to Hobby Lobby, use a 40% off coupon on this and grab one. I only really use Tuxedo Black. For anything I use with my alcohol markers, it's always black, so really good investment and inexpensive. Okay, so next up is the stazon ink. Stazon ink is great for stamping on like slick surfaces, glass or tile, ceramic, acrylic, your transparencies, things like that. You do want to let it dry, but once it's dry, it's done and it's set. And this also works great with watercolors, but I don't know if it is alcohol ink safe or not. I'm assuming not, because they never said that it was. So we're going to test and see. And how we're going to see is basically what it does to my nub of my pen. Like, does it pick it up? Does it bleed out? What does it do? I don't know if stazon ink is considered safe or not. So far, it seems to be okay. but over time, I don't know, like, I don't know, like, if eventually it will pick up on my ink pad, on the ink will pick up. I'm just going to go over this just to see if it will pick up on my nub. Okay, I'm just going over it just to see, and it doesn't appear to have picked up any of it. It didn't bleed through. It worked about the same as the memento. Okay, so that was the stazon. Now, I'm not a chemist, but you know, this is, and I haven't looked this up. I wanted to give a completely objective type review and practice of this right now. So that's why I didn't go and do a whole bunch of research, because I just wanted to try. So stazon ink appears to be good. Do I trust it entirely? Probably not. I'm probably going to stick to this one. And if I were you, if you have this at home, I would definitely test it out first with a marker that you don't care too much about, or I would just stay away from it. It might be working great with this, but if I use maybe a lighter color, it wouldn't. I don't know. So the next one is archival. Now, Ranger says that this is not something that they say you should use with your alcohol ink. They say it's not safe for your pens. So I'm assuming that long term it could do damage if it doesn't start to do damage right away. It is a water proof acid free ink. I love this ink when I'm using distress markers or watercolor markers. It works really great. And I have used archival ink before with my Copic markers, and it does kind of pick up the color and bleed through. It's not doing that on this. So you guys, this is what I am wondering on this. I pre-stamped these. I stamped these first, and they've been sitting for like an hour or two, so they're completely dry. So I'm wondering if the reason why they are coloring so well is because they've completely dried. That's not a bad discovery, because if you're in a pinch, you know that you can possibly stamp your images first and then let them set up to dry. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take that same stamp and stamp it again and immediately color right after I stamp it. So I'm not going to give it any time to really set up. All right, so this is going to be kind of sloppy. This is on the cuff. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I think that it's important that we do, just to see how this all works. And if it is, I think this is going to be the test to determine if these inks are truly safe. I'm wondering, since they're waterproof and like stazon is a fast acting, like a fast dry, if, you know, if you give it time, if it will. And the company can't necessarily just come out and say, hey, you know, it will work with alcohol ink, but you have to give it time, because there's going to be a crafter somewhere who's not going to get that memo or read the back of, you know, the stamp pad, and they're going to ruin an ink pad. So to be safe, they're going to say, no, just don't use our ink with it. You know, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. That's the logic I'm thinking, at least. And yeah, this, okay, so memento still works. It's not pulling ink or anything. So that still works. All right, next up is stazon. So for stazon, we're going to do that over here. And again, I'm just going to take and pop this down. I am going to clean my ink pad, my ink balloon real quick. This is just typical thing that I would do, because I am switching inks over, and I want to make sure that I give it time to dry as well as after I clean it. And then I'm going to take this and go ahead and just pull this one through. The cardstock I'm using is Nina White cardstock, and it's 80 pound from Cut Cardstock. I will have links provided down below on where you can find these products. Thankfully, these are pretty well-known, you know, pads, and you can find them almost anywhere. Your box shops. Okay. All right. So yeah, that worked. It didn't cross contaminate. All right. So now let's do some archival ink. I'm going to pop this on down. I'm going to take and just clean this with a little bit of clean stamp cleaner, just so I'm fair. Do the same thing after each of them, right? Don't want to change the variable too much. And then let's just take this ink on through. Okay, this is actually pulling some of that ink through. It is picking up the ink on the nub. I see a vague line right there. All right, so let me just take, so this did pull, it does smear. So I'm gonna just pull it out. So when this isn't completely dry, for sure, this archival does smear. Just a tad on this, but it is smearing. So, and I'm trying to just get the nub off. So, you know, I think to play it safe, the one pad that is, I think that what you need to do with your alcohol inks is definitely stick to ink pads that claim that they're safe with alcohol inks. This is definitely the one, and the original that I know of when I started playing with these 10 years ago, 12 years ago. This was it, and this has continued to be it. Now, you might be going, well, why? Why do we have all these different, inks? And it basically comes down to what mediums you're doing them. Is it a water-based or an alcohol-based? Is it a pigment-based? That all has to do with the formulations, the chemistry behind, the mediums that you're using and what you can mix and what you can't mix. In my stash, I prefer to either stamp only with the memento, the archival for like my distress markers and my watercolor, and then when I'm stamping surfaces that are not paper, I do stazon, and that's how I separate it out. Those are the three that I use, and that's why. Definitely know this is safe. This one is touchy, if you let it dry, it appears to be okay, but what that dry time is and what part of the country, I don't know. So and then let's just take, let's just mist it with some water and see what happens, because I'm just sitting right here. Why not mist it with some water? Okay, so let's just mist it down with some water and see if it moves at all. Yeah, once it's on pretty good. So anyway, I hope you guys found this beneficial, and if anything, it helped you save a Copic marker from being destroyed because you've been trying to figure out what inks to use and what inks not to use. I can tell you right now, ones that you don't want to use is a pigment ink like this. Never do a pigment ink with this. Distress inks, like the Distress Oxide and Distress ink, never do that either. It's a water-soluble ink. It'll ruin your pad. So, this is one, Avery L. This is one, I love this ink pad. I got it at Creativation a couple years ago. It says that it works great with alcohol markers, but I gotta tell you, the first time that I used it with an alcohol marker, I slapped it down, started coloring, and it kind of bled a little bit. So that's why I'm leery on what inks I will use with my Copics, and it always, always, always is this one. All right, you guys, I hope you found this beneficial. It may have put your mind at ease with some things. It may have, it definitely went a different direction than I had anticipated, but that's what's so fun about doing experimental videos. All right, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I certainly hope that you do so. If you're looking for any of these inks or the stamp set, please check my links down below, as well as the cardstock. I do have that provided, and that just helps fund my channel because it is affiliated, so I do get a little bit of a kickback on that. All right, and that's no additional cost to you guys. I have to say that for legal reasons. All right, until next time, I'm Bets Golden. Happy crafting.